Hi, welcome to my story of healing from domestic abuse and parental alienation. I'm also a survivor of financial abuse and legal abuse, stalking, and harassment in this particular situation. Welcome to my channel. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm sharing this story, and I decided to create this channel because for those men and women out there who might be in my situation, and it's a difficult thing to explain to people, and I just wanted to share how I got to a place where I was able to heal and move forward with my life in the hopes that it might help somebody else who's going through a similar situation. The title of this video today is called Not Your Typical Domestic Abuse Victim, or Am I? And what the public is not aware of is I'm not that untypical. I left my abusive ex 26 years ago. And as I've healed from the domestic abuse and gone through the various, meeting people who are similar in my situation, it's not as rare as one would think. And it can actually happen to anyone. I knew one lady about 3 years ago. She was from one of the top colleges. She had graduated from there, had a very great job, her own home office, and she was going through the exact same thing. And what these people do, the manipulators and the emotional abusers do, is they're really good at it. And they can push you to the brink where you feel like you're going to lose your mind. And that's where she was at. She said, I think I'm going to lose my mind. And the way this works is people who basically want to use you for whatever reason, for your money, or they know that you're going somewhere in life. They're very manipulative, and they prey on certain type of people. And you can have a background of domestic violence in your family, or you could not have a background of domestic violence in your family. These people are really, really skilled at what they do. And what happens is we get to the point where we just can't take it in the marriage anymore. And then they start using the children as a pawn to hurt us. And this was my story. In my particular situation, there is generational domestic violence. My grandfather domestically abused my grandmother. And there was violence. And my mother was emotionally abused and controlled by my father. So we've got a cycle in our family, and that's why I probably fell into this at a very young age. A lot of it had to do with, what was acceptable and not acceptable with my previous generations. And for me personally, once I left my marriage is when I started my journey of healing. And I was about 30 years old, and I started, therapy. I also was recognized as a domestic violence victim by the local shelter. They screened me, and they gave me group therapy for 4 years at the shelter. Also, I was in codependency recovery program for 4 years as well, because a lot of codependents get into relationships with abusive people. They have to have someone. If you're not codependent when you begin the relationship, you're going to be codependent at the end of the relationship, because it won't work any other way. Because everything, and that's how I grew up, everything was around pleasing my dad. And our feelings weren't valid. what we wanted wasn't valid. I mean, at the age 30, I didn't even know what my favorite color was, which is embarrassing, but it's true. And I know there's a lot of women who are in my position. But as I've, gone on my journey and I've talked to, and I help people, in private. If I recognize they're in a bad situation, I give them information on resources where they can get help. And that's when I spoke to this one woman about 3 years ago. But a lot of the women have good jobs. I've met a lot of nurses who have fallen into this situation, school teachers. They're usually intelligent people. And, they're very motivated. And they're just trying to, they're trying to live their life. And here comes a predator, who wants to use you. And, and because we're so busy living our lives, trying to, do what we're trying to do, and a lot of us, they're so good at figuring out what it is that we want and becoming that person. And that's what happened in my situation. And getting out of these situations is extremely difficult. And for me personally, I'm still dealing with it 26 years later, believe it or not. Because when I asked for a divorce, my ex-abuser's mantra was, she left me and our child. And that was not what happened. I left him, not the child, but he became a victim all of a sudden, even though he was the one who was controlling everything I did. I was on an allowance. I mean, it happens very slowly over time. It doesn't happen right away. And, I got to the point where I was on a $20 allowance. I wasn't allowed to leave the house unless he was with me, unless it was for work. I was driving a beat-up car while he was buying motorcycles and RVs, new clothing. I was being used. And it just got worse and worse. And then he was cheating on me all the time. And it was affecting my physical health as well, because you can get STDs, even if you're married, of course, and they cheat on you. So it was affecting me physically as well. And it just got to the point where he was blowing up my credit cards, and I just had enough. And it did push me over the edge mentally. So I finally, with therapy, got strong again, and I left him. And then it was, oh, she left us. No, that wasn't what happened. I left you. But what I learned later on through the shelter is the most dangerous time is when you leave. And I went through 8 years of, court, being dragged into court for every little thing. And he was completely using our child as a pawn. And it was so painful for me. It just tore me up inside watching our child go through that. So I would describe that as probably the most painful thing I've ever been through in my life. Because, today I'm fine, I'm calm about it, but I've been dealing with this for a long time. And I've been learning as I go. And, I'm a different person today. And, I just want to share, there's a lot of men and women out there who are victims. And you don't have to have an abusive background to be a victim. And there's a lot of women. I used to have a subset group at the shelter, and we met separately. We all had really good jobs, and we were in the exact same situation. And our exes were trying to take custody and all of this other stuff. And I guess the point is it can be anyone. I know the image a lot of people have in their minds of domestic violence or abuse victims is they're doing drugs or they're drinking or they did something to bring it on themselves. And that's a tiny percentage. And no one brings it on themselves. Everyone's accountable for what they do, no matter what. But a tiny percentage falls into that category. Most of us had decent jobs. You know, that was what I walked through. And I've, helped people along the way. And I met another woman who worked in a similar job field that I worked in, who went through heck getting her ex out of her place where she lived. She had a little bit more support than I had, so her family was very, very instrumental in getting him out of there. Thank goodness for her family, but she too was in a similar job. So, anyone, this could happen to anyone, and especially if it's just in who you are. If there's something in you another person wants, and if they're manipulative, it can happen. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me on my first video. I really appreciate it. And the next video that I will be sharing is called How Manipulators Manipulate. Thanks so much for joining me.